Back in the 1800s, a successful surgery means you didn't die. That's pretty much it. Where? An open theater full of other doctors taking notes. When? During a time period where people believed that leeches could suck ghosts out of your blood. The smell? A sweaty meat locker. The soundtrack? Listening to your own screams because anesthetic, not a thing. Today we are talking about the horrors of 1800s, aka Victorian era surgeries. If you like weird and wacky, bite-sized deep dives on niche and even a little bit macabre topics or geeky and nerdy stuff like video games, movies, and D&D, I would really appreciate it if you give my channel a check out, but let's get straight into the video. Today we're talking about more medical histories that should have stayed buried. The golden age of surgery. And by golden, I mean piss-colored with a side of sepsis, because surgeries in the Victorian times was like the OG torture porn. The use of local and general anesthesia hadn't been implemented into modern surgeries. Surgeons often wore blood-crusted coats as badges of honor from their last surgery. And babies were operated on without any anesthesia or painkillers because they believed that babies just didn't feel pain. The logic here was that babies don't feel pain because their nervous systems are still under construction, but spoiler alert, they were not. Prior to 1846, surgeons did not use any type of anesthetic, which meant that you were fully awake during things like amputations, gallbladder extractions, and kidney stone extractions, which is absolutely bonkers. If the doctor was feeling generous, they might give you an alcohol-soaked rag or a leather strap to bite down on, but that's pretty much it. I wish I could tell you that I was kidding when I said that screaming was so common that doctors even used it as a way to gauge how well the surgery was going.
Hey doc, he's getting kind of loud over here. Do you want me to like tone it down or pour some whiskey in his mouth or something? My boy, no, that means we're doing a good job. The surgery is nice and painful.
Anesthesia itself wasn't even introduced into the medical world until 1846, when William T.G. Morton performed a successful operation using the practice at the Massachusetts General Hospital. Now, this one is for any Act 2 BG3 fans or maybe Broadway fans, because originally, exploratory and experimental surgeries were almost always conducted in a theater setting. What's worse than having to have your leg cut off without anesthesia? Doing it in front of a live studio audience. Operating theaters were literal theaters, circular balconies, wooden floors, dozens of med students, or even some weird Victorian perverts watching surgeons cut people open from below. One of the most famous operating theaters was at St. Thomas Hospital in London, and it is actually still a museum today, built in 1822. And while surgical theater is still something that is used today for medical training and medical students, this was completely different. Basically, some random guy with probably not enough credibility named Reginald Throttlewhack would roll up his blood-crusted sleeves and hack you open in front of every single person and their mother. In many of these surgical theaters, the floors were actually on an angle so that the blood would roll down a certain direction, which kind of makes sense, but also, are we not worried about the precision of the surgery? Because anesthetics were not generally in use, there was a kind of rule for when you did surgeries that you wanted to do them as fast as possible. The average time for an amputation should take no more than 3 minutes, according to Victorian doctors, which is insane. Because speed was kind of a necessary requirement for so many surgeons, a lot of people got competitive with it. Enter Robert Liston, the Usain Bolt of medical horror. He boasted that he could perform an amputation in less than 30 seconds. Liston was known for his speed skill, but not his precision. His most legendary oopsie during a live surgery was an incident where he amputated a man's leg, probably all according to plan. He sliced off one of his assistant's fingers, he nacked a bystander's coat, who later apparently died of fright, and the patient later died of infection. Now, if you do the math, that is a 300% mortality rate for a single surgery. Personally, I'm a little stuck on the died of fright thing. The bystander's coat was nicked, and that person apparently died of fright. Like, just from shock, just had a heart attack right there. And I know a lot of people died of fright in the Victorian era, so I'm a little curious to see what that entails. Now, this is the part where history just gives up. In the 1800s, doctors concluded that babies do not feel pain. Apparently, they were just crying all the time because they liked the sound. But since they believed that babies' nervous systems were still being constructed, they thought there was no reason to give babies painkillers, so they would perform surgeries with no anesthesia and no painkillers like circumcisions, tumor removal, and even open heart surgery, just letting it cry the whole time. Now, I'm gonna give you a wild guess when science first documented that babies can and do feel pain, okay? When do you think it was? We got like the 1880s. Just give me your best guess of when people realized that babies could feel pain. This shit was not documented until the 1980s, bro. I know that parents and mothers and most doctors probably acknowledged, like in the 50s and 60s and 70s, that babies could feel pain, but for it not to be medically recognized until 1980s? What the hell? So up until Reagan was in office, we were just doing medieval torture methods on new, fleshy, newly born humans. But we're not here to talk about that. That's a video for another time. Let's go back to the Victorian era, and about how people in the Victorian era didn't believe in germs. Up until the 1860s, doctors believed that the spread of disease was caused by miasma, or bad air. And it couldn't have anything to do with the fact that they haven't washed their fingernails in a week and they're digging around in your spleen. That couldn't be it. That's ridiculous. Enter Inges Semmelweis, the king of vibes and hand soap. In 1847, he noticed that the mortality rates during surgeries dropped when doctors washed their hands with chlorinated lime. Now, I didn't know what chlorinated lime was. I looked it up. It's like bleach. So rest in peace their skin, I guess. Even though during surgeries where doctors washed their hands with chlorinated lime, the mortality rate significantly dropped, most people still mocked Semmelweis. That's right, instead of being celebrated, this man was institutionalized for being crazy, for thinking that maybe we shouldn't be poking around and touching corpses and then touching women's open uteruses. Hello? This man was put in a crazy house for washing his hands. Oh my god, bro. He was trying to help. Victorian medicine, where being sanitary gets you locked into the asylum. Great. But there was a turning point for all of this in 1865, where we invented anesthesia and antiseptic. Finally, the nightmare of surgery becomes less visceral. In 1865, a doctor named Joseph Lister started using carbolic acid to clean the wounds and sterilize tools of patients. And if the name Lister sounds familiar, it's literally because this is the guy that Listerine is named after. Not to be confused with Robert Liston, who was the speed slicer. Not him. This is Mouthwash Man. He's good guy. Joseph Lister documented that as he began to sterilize his tools and hands as he was doing surgeries, the mortality rates dropped. But for some reason, they didn't send him to the asylum, which seems totally unfair to my boy Semmelweis. This also sparked the movement of doctors and surgeons no longer wearing blood-crusted coats, because it's not a badge of honor, it's actually kind of gross. By the 19th century, anesthesia and sterilization were pretty common throughout all surgeries, and we officially graduated from Saw 4 to Grey's Anatomy Season 1. Round of applause for all the doctors who finally figured that out. It took them way too long. But surgeries prior to 1846 were literal horror shows. They took place in open theaters for almost anybody to watch, not just up-and-coming doctors. Babies weren't spared any kinds of trauma or given any kinds of painkillers. Most people were just instructed to bite down on a leather strap, but babies don't have teeth, so they can't do that. And if you even merely suggested to wash your hands after digging around in someone's lungs, you would go to the asylum. So it was pretty much dead in the water from there. But now we have all sorts of cool advancements in surgery, like robot arms, sedatives, and doctors who don't reuse the same bone saw on every single patient. I hope you enjoyed this little bite-sized chunk of the horrors of Victorian surgery. If you enjoyed this video, I'd really appreciate it if you left a comment or checked out my channel. My name is Melody. Let me know what you think about this video, and if you didn't like it, let me know too. Until next time!